Okay, so let's take a look at question 1, part A. The question asks for 3 characteristics of living organisms other than growth. One of the things you'll find me saying over and over again, read the entire question, okay? So you know for sure that you are going to name 3, but one of them will not be growth. For those of us that remember, we can use the mnemonic GRIM now and just use the all the letters except G, right? And these are all the possibilities. You're just going to list 3. And it's worth 3 marks, so that's 1 mark per characteristic. Now let's take a look at part B, question 1, part B. And in this question, we are looking at a graph. We are analyzing a graph. I just want to see the pattern. Okay, so we have 2 growth patterns, one X and one Y. And we'll notice that, now this is how you go about looking at the question. Whenever you get a graph or a picture, a diagram, even describing a case study, go through it first, analyze it first, make sure you have a clear understanding of what it is, then look at the question. So we have here a graph. We see that there are 2 curves, X and Y. We can see that the graph is showing a growth pattern of 2%. That's this thing over here. We see that the weight is in kilograms, and we are seeing that it's changed over years. So this is not a growth pattern in, let's say, for a baby in the first year of growth. We're looking at their growth from baby to adulthood, essentially. Now, 2 things we're noticing. One, that X shows a very gradual change, but you would notice that Y has a persistent gradual increase over time, but then there's this part here where the growth actually slows down compared to X. So there's a certain point at which X is actually tall, well, bigger, heavier than Y, but then Y experiences this growth spurt and very quickly surpasses X and continues surpassing X in terms of weight for right up to adulthood. So now we're going to take a look at the question, and it's asking which one represents the growth of a female. The answer for that is X, and let's see why. X is the dashed line, right? Y is the curve that showed that growth spurt. We also saw that once we get past that midpoint where the growth rates actually switch on each other, and then you have that growth spurt, after that the Y continues on to always have a higher weight than X, which reflects what goes on between males and females. Adult males tend to be heavier, tend to be taller than adult females. That higher muscle to fat ratio, muscle tends to be more dense than fat weight-wise, so high muscle to fat means that the adult males are going to be heavier, even if they are the same height. Let's move on to part C. They give you the diagram of an animal cell. You analyze the diagram. This here with the structures you can see with a light microscope. You can see these structures with a light microscope, but we also see some additional structures that you normally wouldn't see with a light microscope. This will be your ER, your endoplasmic reticulum, in fact your rough ER. Also, we notice how much more detail we get with the nucleus. We actually see the nucleolus, we're actually seeing the nuclear pores, you're seeing the detail on the nuclear membrane. So we can see now that this diagram represents an animal cell as seen with an electron microscope. Let's just look at the question again, and it's asking you to label on figure 2 the cell organelle in which the process of mitosis starts, and then write the name. And that's what we just did here. We labeled the nucleus and we put the name next to it. Okay, you know, some people like to write their labels on top of the label line, and that shouldn't even be a smiley face. That should be a sad face, because we don't want that. Write it next to your label line. Smiley face, right? So now let's look at the next question. The eye. And we already see clearly a cross section, side view, and we're also seeing several structures highlighted, and we're also seeing that 3 of the structures are highlighted. So we have label C, we have label B, we have label A. So we know already that part of this question will involve naming these labels. So A is pointing to the sclera, which is that outer membrane that helps to keep the shape of the eye. And then we have B, which it can point. I'll tell you why it's not the retina. Some people may look at this and say, but it's pointing at this. And no, if it were pointing at that part of the eye, 2 things will be happening. Most likely the label line will be here. And on top of that, the label would most likely start here, or it might do something like this, where they would point to that outer layer, because it's this outer layer that would have all the photoreceptor cells. That would tell you, okay, they're labeling the retina. However, the label line ends at the black, that thick black line of the choroid. It has that dark pigment to prevent internal reflection in the eye. And C is Sakai. Yes, pun intended. The lens. Those are our answers. 1 mark each: sclera, choroid, and lens. Let's look at this question now. 10-year-old Dwayne goes to cinema with his father, and entering the dark room, he cannot see anything. They're asking how cones which are sensitive to light cause Dwayne's temporary blindness. Let's pay close attention to several things here. 1, he's entering a dark room. Even if it's nighttime, he would have been outside. There's a lot of artificial lighting. There would have been light around. So he's going from light to dark. Explain how the cones, which are sensitive to light, cause Dwayne's temporary blindness. Now this is important because the cones are not the only reason for his temporary blindness, right? Remember, you have 2 types of photoreceptor cells. You have cones and you have rods. The cones are the ones that allow you to see color and are very sensitive to light, but they respond to high light intensity. Rods respond to low light intensity, but they don't allow you to see color. So when they ask you to talk about the cones, you have to give your answer in that context. And that is what we are doing here. Alright, when Dwayne enters the darkened room, the intensity falls, yes, because he goes from normal to high light intensity to a dark room. So therefore the amount of light that's going to fall on the cones is going to decrease. And remember, the cones respond to high light intensity. So they're no longer able to get enough stimuli to trigger them, because the light will trigger them to produce nerve impulses. That means it's not going to be sending nerve impulses to the brain, and the brain can then interpret and make you see. So therefore, he is temporarily blind because his brain isn't getting enough signals from his eyes to tell you what is around you. So that's basically it. 3 marks. 1, you talk about the change in light intensity. 2, you make reference to the fact that the cones respond to high light intensity, and what does that mean if it's no longer getting high light intensity? And then, of course, what is the consequence of that? To make the connection to him being temporarily blind. So let's go on to the next part of this question. How does Dwayne's eyes adjust in the dark to enable him to see, to walk to his seat? His cones aren't working too well because there isn't enough light for it to work with. So what do his eyes do? So the first thing is that you want to expand the pupil. You want to get as much light as possible into the eye, hitting that retina. So that's the first thing that happens. The iris, right? The muscles of the iris, they work to expand the pupil, make that pupil wider. And why? Because you want to maximize the quantity of light that gets on the retina. And then the rods now, which are sensitive to low light intensity, those guys get triggered and are able to send nerve impulses to the brain. producing just enough vision so that he can get to his seat. Give your brain enough information that he could move around without stubbing your toe. Okay, so that's part 2. The other part of the question now, part C. Name of the process by which Dwayne's eyes adjust. This is different now. Before we were looking at adjusting to light versus dark. Now they're asking you about making the adjustment from near to far, so it's difference in distance. And that adjustment is called accommodation. And we have several things to talk about here. One, we can talk about the function of the cartilage as well as the location of the cartilage. Any one of the following would work. So those are 3 possible answers. Protect the bone, spread the load, to prevent shock, and add flexibility. And then the location. Where can we find these tissues? You can find them at the ends of long bones. You can find them between vertebrae. You can find them in the sternum, trachea, and of course for the flexibility, your nose and earlobes, right, to produce very flexible structures. A part 2, where you have to describe major differences. So any one of these would work. So connect muscle to bone, that's 1, versus ligaments connect bone to bone. And this is important. Anytime they say something about major difference or compare, don't just describe one side, you have to describe both. So if I had said, well, tendons connect muscle to bone, yeah, the answer is not complete. You have to complete the answer. The complete answer is tendons connect muscle to bone, whereas ligaments connect bone to bone. So you have to include the 2 in your answer, or else it will not be accepted as an answer. Tendons are inelastic, ligaments are elastic. Right, now let's look at another part of question 3. Okay, so we have here a boy kicking a ball, and the question is saying whether he's a 4-year-old who has just discovered football. He's fascinated by how well he can kick the ball. And we just have a picture of a boy kicking a ball. Let's identify one type of joint that Roger will utilize to kick the ball. Well, he's using his legs to kick the ball, and of course from his knee down, that joint, the knee joint, would be involved in moving his foot up to kick the ball. But the joint at his pelvis is also important because that allows him to position his leg to get under that ball to then kick it. So either joint will be applicable here. You can say either hinge joint or ball and socket joint. And the next part of the question asks that we put an X to show the location of the type of joint identified in B1. So if you indicated hinge joint, then it would be this one, right, at his knee. And if you said ball and socket joint, you put the X around here at the pelvis area. Now let's move on to the next part. So we have here, Roger is also able to throw the football during the game. This is possible because of the antagonistic muscles located in his upper arm. So what is meant by the term antagonistic muscles? Pair of muscles that work together, they work in tandem, and they produce movement in opposite directions. Why is that necessary? Because the muscles can only produce a pulling force. They cannot produce a pushing force. So you need one muscle to pull in one direction and then another muscle to pull in the opposite direction so that you can get that full range of movement. And then in the next part, they ask you to identify in the upper arm is the biceps and triceps. Can't go wrong with that. And we have here the explanation. So the bicep lifts the lower arm and the triceps extends the arm. So by working together in a coordinated way, Roger can then lift the ball, and then to throw it, it would involve the triceps extend the arm back out forcefully in order to throw the ball. And that would give you your throwing action. So in question 4, you have to complete sentence with some words provided. So the full sentence is, lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell, make substances called antibodies and antitoxins to destroy pathogens like bacteria and viruses and the toxins produced by the pathogens. Next one, the white blood cells which engulf pathogens are called phagocytes. So Dr. Mitchell, he's going to Africa and they advise her to get a vaccine before going on her trip. And the organism that causes typhoid is a bacterium. And you have to identify one sign or symptom. Any of these would work. Right, gives her active immunity. Explain how this vaccine offers protection. You have several steps here. So firstly, what does the vaccine contain? It contains inactivated pathogen or component of the pathogen. What does it do? It triggers her immune response. And of course, the immune response will involve also the production of memory cells that can remember the pathogen later on, so that it can then react to the pathogen much faster the next time and more intensely. It would prevent infection. In other words, it would deal with the pathogen so quickly that the pathogen doesn't even get a chance to establish itself. That's what they mean by it prevent infection. Or if it does get a chance to establish itself in your body can still deal with it, eject it, and allow recovery. And the type of drug, it's a bacteria, so therefore the type of drug would be antibiotics. Question 5. What do we mean by each of the terms? Right, aerobic, most important part of it, aerobic, respiration that uses oxygen. That's basically. So respiration that uses oxygen to produce cellular energy. You can even add the name of the chemical, ATP. And anaerobic respiration, absence of oxygen. Right? That's the thing that they're looking for. So absence of oxygen to produce cellular energy. And the next part, one waste product, carbon dioxide. So he uses energy to erase the blackboard. Right? What are some other substrates? What are some other chemicals that are used to produce energy? You have your lipids and you have your protein, of course, emphasizing your amino acids. And this cell organelle, your mitochondria. Yeah, because respiration is the release of energy from the glucose. Moving on, we have here energy is released from ATP. ATP is produced with the aid of figure 5. Explain the word. If they say with the aid of, in the context of a question like this, a structured question, you're not really drawing anything, then you have to refer to what is being shown in the figure in your answer. As you see here, the loss of a phosphate group from ATP releases energy that can then be used by the cell. Right? So it's referring to this part of the process. And then during the respiratory process, energy is used to add, hence you have your plus sign, phosphate group to ADP to reform ATP. So he can't see well at night. That is a sign of vitamin A deficiency. And foods, any two of these or any others that you may come across, dark green leafy vegetables, liver, milk, carrots, any two. Which enzymes are present in the human stomach? Renin, pepsin, done. Type of food broken down by salivary amylase, carbohydrates. If it had said which nutrient or which chemical or which substrate, then the word starch would come in here. However, it says type of food. So you're looking at your types of foods. So you have carbohydrates, because starch is a carbohydrate. Right, so we have a graph and it's essentially an interpretation of a graph. So as usual, let's look at the diagram first. So we have here on the y-axis, you have relative activity. And the x-axis of pH, title of the graph is activity of two enzymes at different pH levels. So when we talk about relative activity, we are talking about the activity of an enzyme. And what does an enzyme do? It basically catalyzes, speeds up chemical reaction. And pH, of course, as we go from 4 to 10, we're going from acid to alkaline. Those of us that don't remember, so your midpoint here will be about 7. So you have here neutral, which will be around here at this point, and you're essentially interpreting a graph. So they have minimum and maximum. So this here will be peak activity, and this will be zero activity. So at what pH does saliva amylase function best? Well, we're looking at peak activity. So we're looking at somewhere around here. We already highlighted where 7 probably is. So we know it's somewhere around 7. I would even say it could go as, you might go as far as 7.5, because the mark schemes would generally give you a range. They'd probably say, okay, 7 plus or minus 0.5. So once your answer falls within that range, you're okay. pH values at which saliva amylase stops, 0, and that's at pH 4 and pH 10. It stops working at a very high acidity, and it stops working at very high alkaline condition. So explain why it stops functioning when it reaches the stomach. Well, what is the pH of the stomach? 2, which is very acidic. And therefore, amylase doesn't work in very acidic conditions, so it stops working. Right, so in what kind of pH conditions does pancreatic amylase function best? Alkaline, because remember, we were looking at 7 to 7.5. So if you said something like neutral to alkaline, I know I put 6.5, but actually it's more 7 to 7.5. So that's neutral to alkaline. And the chemical, this was found in pancreatic juice, sodium bicarbonate. So let's look at question 7. As we can see, we have a diagram, and we're going to analyze it first. This is a side view of the male reproductive system of a human. And we have certain parts that are labeled, and the labels are already provided: bladder, urethra, seminal vesicle. But we also have some labels that are not named as yet. So the question is asking, identify the parts labeled A, B, and C. So that's what we did here. B is erectile tissue, A, vas deferens, testis is C. Part B, he has prostate cancer. So which structure is most likely blocked? G, urethra. Why? Let's take a look at it. Where's the prostate? The prostate gets swollen, and it would then encroach on the urethra, and you would end up getting some blockage. So suggest how it may affect his urination. So he will have difficulty urinating, it will not be able to flow out, he might also have some pain while urinating. Okay, so in discussing birth control, Grandpa Tom advises the contraceptive pill is more reliable than the rhythm method. So the question is asking why. Let's compare the two. You describe the rhythm method, and what does the rhythm method depend on? It depends on the menstrual cycle being naturally regular, and for many women that's not the case. So the rhythm method is not reliable because of that. Right? The contraceptive pill, however, regulates the menstrual cycle. You take it, and it actually blocks the release of the ovum, which is what needs to be fertilized for you to get pregnant. So if the ovum isn't there, you can't get fertilized, can't get pregnant, and therefore it is more reliable. Yeah. So that's C part 1. So let's go on to C part 2. Right. So I only included about maybe 1 or 2. When they say suggest, there are so many possibilities. So these are just some suggestions: economics, small families, cheaper to maintain, social health, you're easier to spend time with, and raise a smaller number of children. You have more time to spend with them and invest in them. And then of course you have pregnancy related risks. If you're getting pregnant regularly, there's increased risk to you health wise, and there are many others. Feel free to add other suggestions in the comments below. Let me know what you think, and yeah, we can have a nice little discussion about it.